trim that afterwards.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you're all having a great time. Say a special thank you, I'd like to say a special thank you to Kenny at the Osaka Hotel for providing the awards. I was joking with one of the guys that's in charge here tonight. I said, you know, you gotta change your game. Get closer to a Motel 6 kind of experience, so that you can really, you know, improve your business model. And of course, there was, I don't know, he didn't think it was funny. I thought it was pretty funny. So, and I'm, as usual, not on time. In our family, we call it Schippercassie time, and it's almost 6:15, right? It's 6:30-ish, and we have a great presenter for you. Phil Dixon was our keynote speaker when we were in Branson. And so that's when I started to understand this whole Negro Leagues, and earlier, because I actually asked Phil to talk about the ball players, the Negro players, African American players from the 1800s. And yes, Phil knew all of that and more. And then he introduced me to the players from the early 1900s. And in case, how many got to see Leslie and Phil's work at the museum today, the Hall of Fame? We need some applause. And foolishly, I told Leslie that's not good enough yet, but that's kind of my job. We need to get a display of something about money and space. The Negro players, the African American players from the 1800s, they really weren't there. It was the Giants and whatnot. Anyway, I'm eating up all of Phil's time, and I apologize. And thank he and his wife for both being here today. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Gary, for that introduction. I'm going to have to stand in one place so I can get on the screen, so I guess he's going to have to push it on, so I get a little feedback here. So I do want to thank everybody for being here, coming to the conference. And, you know, I do a lot of speaking, you know, around town, around the country, that kind of thing, and a lot of nighttime speaking. So I like to have fun. So just want to let you know, if you came here to hear a boring speech, you're in the wrong speech. We had fun together, and that's the most important thing. Because you, after all, you could have been at home watching Dancing with the Stars. So I'm glad you're here tonight. So we're going to jump right into it. Well, first of all, we need to get going, right? So everybody's sitting down. So anybody know the words? Everybody know the words? Take me out to the ball game? Yeah. All right, let's hold on a second. You gotta wait just a minute.
Can we sing along?
Well, I have to say this. I did a presentation with Frank Whitley the other day, and many times he and Satchel Paige would come to the game, and they didn't warm up. I'm a musician. I got to warm up just a little bit.
And then you'll hear the note we're starting. You ready?
Yeah.
Bill, you ever go in a game without warming up? First of all, it's an honor to be on the same platform with Bill Lee tonight. So we're going to jump right into my program. One of the things I call my tour, I change it to different names, different years. So this name, part of this year, is called The Giants. And so people say, why do you want to call it The Giants? Well, when they wanted me to talk about some of the difficulties that African American players had in their travels and in their relationship with baseball, the Giants is one of those things. So once upon a time, they didn't put many black people's photographs in the newspaper, but they need some kind of way to identify when a black team came. So they began naming all the black teams the Giants. So if it wasn't the New York Giants and it said Giants, you could bet it's going to be a black team. So I put this poem together, and I'm going to start off with that and go from there. But it's called The Giants. They came fast, they came slow, then disappeared like the last light of the sun in segregated America. And all we saw was their glory. But it will be lonely there when people have forgotten that there's no one left to share. After all, no one is happy these brothers were treated so unfair. You see, some Giants played for fame. They were athletes in a baseball game who tore their rotator cuffs and came up throwing. Some of them were down, some of them were lost, some were never found. But most have seen it all. They spent their life in crowded cars and touring buses, barnstorming for glory, but there was no one there to tell their story. In a town, few can recall one of these Giants really slugged the ball. He had 5 hits, scored 3 runs, bases stolen 4. I'd like to know more, I'd like to know where. But there was no one there to score this game. And for added shame, the newspapers didn't bother to publish his name. Some Giants had arms of steel, so they put it on display. Some Giants had great speed, even I could watch them run all day. Some excelled at hitting ball with bat, and gee, their hitting was advanced. Young boys said, I could do that if I had half the chance. I could be a giant like bronzemen of age 25, young and alive, crowds watching them as they walked and laughed, then asked for memorabilia and autographs. In small towns and big cities too, people filled the stands and gave their approval with feet and hands while they played with ball and glove. As young girls marveled at their physique and dreamed of kissing him on the cheek, yet these men never could believe you truly loved them. Some Giants made it when they were old, like solid gold, playing well past their prime, playing tricks on Father Time, using the talent they still could share. Deep down soul they had to bear. Or maybe there wasn't much there, because they would say, I didn't have much then, but when I was young, you wouldn't let me in. For surely the wise knew that the day would come when someone would say, 20 years ago, you were one tough cookie, but now you must make way for rookies. But will we ever know the pain of living with a nickname you never owned? Coup Papa, Turkey, Double Duty, or Buck, a nickname on loan that somehow stuck. Or forgetting the job, the only job you've ever known, living out of a suitcase, living away from home, or being the showcase, or I could make a case to show these men were never paid the money their gift was owed. These were black men scorned and despised, the original Giants, the unrecognized, who came fast, who came slow, then disappeared like the last line of segregated America. But tonight, we're going to learn a little bit more about their story. So let's get started. danced with a lot of photos. This photograph here is one on Frank Whitworth. And this is a picture taken down in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And then when I was writing this, I was thinking about certain things. And one of the players I was thinking about was a guy named Chet Brewer. I don't know if you've ever heard of Chet Brewer. Chet Brewer played for the Kansas City Monarchs. But when he was 4 years old, he lived in Leavenworth, Kansas. And his foot was partially run over by a trolley car. And he lost 3 toes. And that was on the important foot that you step down on when you're pitching. But he went on to have more than a 25-year career in the Negro Leagues. And then when he retired, he went out to Los Angeles and put together a team called Chet Brewer's Rookies. Now, if anyone has ever talked to some guy who's a scout or a coach, they would be happy to have one player go to the big leagues. Am I right on that? Well, Chet Brewer had 8. And they were the people who were part of my childhood. How many people heard of Reggie Smith? How about Bob Watson? How about Enos Cabell? How about Roy White? How about Willie Crawford? And his bat boy was Eddie Murray. That's Chet Brewer. 1987, I go out to Chet Brewer's house. I'm there for 3 days. Stayed right in Chet Brewer's house. So we talked about baseball. He took me around to meet everybody. So I'm sitting there on the last day. So what do you think I asked Chet on that last day? Can I see the foot? So I can't say I'm one of the rare few people that saw Chet Brewer's foot without the touch. Anyway, he's a legend. I was thinking about Chet Brewer when I did that. And then, of course, you can't talk about baseball, really, about Negro League baseball, without Bud Fowler. And I got up this morning with my wife and with the guy, Mike Hauser. We went to visit Bud Fowler's burial place. Bud Fowler. Bud Fowler was a pioneer, played all over the United States. But he was out playing in New Mexico, in the New Mexico League, and he couldn't eat at the dinner table with the rest of the team. But Bud Fowler, he made some statements here. He was talking about what black people were doing in baseball. This is 1888. And if you ever read things about Bud Fowler, you know, there's a thing called talking in dialect. And people would write things about dialect, talking in dialect. But when they quoted Bud Fowler, it was never in dialect. And Bud Fowler went to school right here in Cooperstown. He's the only ball player who actually lived in Cooperstown, who was enshrined in Cooperstown. And that's Bud Fowler. A lot of things I can tell you about Bud Fowler. I'm trying to think if there's anything that jumps out that you probably haven't heard. Well, first of all, his name is John Jackson. Leslie can vouch for this. When we did the statistical project, we had to go out and find people. You know how tough it is to find a guy with the last name Williams, Jones? How about Jackson? So I'm glad he changed the name to Bud Fowler. And the reason they say he did that because he had a really bad memory with names, and he played so many places that he would just run up against people and say, "Hey, how's it going, Bud?" And that's why they called him Bud. That's Bud Fowler. And a great pioneer, and you probably saw his picture if you went over to the Hall of Fame. And then also another guy I met, now he was in Topeka, Kansas. Now, I have to tell you, I'm in my 45th year as a baseball historian. I met Mr. Moffel, and his name is Carroll Ray Moffel, in 1980, I think it was 1980. And I met him, and about 2 weeks later, he passed away. But before he died, he said, if this guy comes back, he said, give him all of my photographs. After 2 weeks, he had no relatives or anything. And so that's how I acquired the first photo. One of them is that long World Series print. I put that on the market to raise money to do research in 1980. Sold it for $3 an image. It's still out there, right? But meeting Mr. Moffel. The interesting thing about Mr. Moffel, he left all these items to me, and there was a passport, his passport, when he had went to Japan. It was in this, all in this collection. And when I looked at the passport, his birthday was August 13th. When do you think my birthday is? August the 13th. Now, my wife is here, and we just passed 40 years married. Guess when her birthday is? August the 13th. So Mr. Moffel was on something, right? And so every time I go to Topeka, Kansas, I always stop and decorate his grave, Mr. Monarch. And the reason he retired is because he tore his rotator cuff, 1934. And then, of course, like most people, I played baseball. The first time I put on a uniform, it was for a guy named Sherman Roebuck Jones, played for the 1962 Mets, one of baseball's all-time worst teams. They were worse than last year's White Sox. You got to admit that was a pretty bad record. But they were bad too. But they were bad a long time ago, right? So anyway, sometimes he would sit us down and he would tell a story or two. I remember him. He used to say, Casey Stengel, you probably heard this. That was his manager, 62 Mets. And Casey Stengel had a thing. And Casey Stengel said, do you know the trait of a good manager? And it's this. The trait of a good manager is keeping the guys who hate you away from the guys who are undecided. That's Casey Stengel. So I can say I actually played for somebody who got instruction from Casey Stengel the first time I put on the uniform. And also I collected baseball cards. So I started collecting baseball cards in 1964, but it actually wasn't baseball cards at first. It was the Beatles. And I started collecting the Beatles. Of course, everybody knows the Beatles came to America in 1964, right? And I went and collected all these cards. I used to go to a store for a lady, and she always had me give me snuff and skim milk. So that's how I got all my cards. And so I took my Beatles cards to school to show my friends, and my sister, my teacher saw us with the Beatles card, and she took my Beatles cards, and she said, these are toys, don't bring these back to school. Never did get them back. And so when I went back to the store to buy more Beatles cards, they were all sold out. The only thing they had left was those dad baseball cards. So I started collecting baseball cards. By the time I was 19, I had over 100,000 baseball cards. And that was in the days where you didn't buy a whole set. So guys, I chewed a lot of gum. Now I did have one secret because out of those 100,000 cards, I had the 1954 tops complete. I had the 55. I even had T cards. I had all the Fleer sets, Life of Ted Williams, all of those complete with the rare 68. I know all of this stuff. And I had all of those completed. And the way I got those, well, remember, I didn't start till 64, right? Whenever teenage boys in my neighborhood found out about girls, I got their cards. That's how you build a collection, guys. I'm trying to give you young guys some tips. All right? So I built an entire collection. And I've been at it a long time. The first article written about me was in 1977. It was about collecting baseball cards, right? And guys, I had a whole lot more hair back then. And then, of course, the first book I read about Babe Ruth. I think then I was probably in the 5th grade. And it was in our reader, and when you read about Babe Ruth, if you had told me at that time, because I hadn't started playing baseball yet, and if you had told me 714 home runs was great, I wouldn't have known. Right? If you had told me 300 average was great, I wouldn't have known any of it, even though the baby did hit 300. But I wouldn't have known any of that. But they said that Babe Ruth ate 21 hot dogs between a doubleheader. I didn't know what a double header was, but I know what 21 hot dogs was. Right? So just like that, I became a Ruth fan. One of my favorite things on Babe Ruth, you guys are baseball fans, I'm sure some of you have heard this. 1927, he made more money than the President of the United States. And someone came to Babe and said, hey, you know you made more money than the President? And Babe said, why not? I had a better year. Then my favorite player growing up was Dick Allen. Happy to see Dick in the Hall of Fame. I used to fight kids. I had to have that number 15. I played ball from maybe about the 6th grade all the way through high school. 15 was my number because of Dick Allen. And I finally met Dick a couple of years before he passed away. And I said, Dick, trying to be like you got me kicked off more teams. I don't know how much you know about Dick Allen. But he got me actually kicked off because he was my star, and I wanted to be like Dick Allen. But I knew a lot about him, and he was tickled pink just hearing my story. I was able to give him a book and say thank you for keeping me motivated through those years and getting me kicked off the field too. That's Dick Allen. Dick Allen, quick story on Dick Allen. First time he ever played on AstroTurf. They came to Dick Allen and they said, how do you love this new AstroTurf? He said, if a horse can't eat it, I don't want to play. That was Dick Allen. Finally got to the Hall of Fame. And then, when you talk about segregation, it's an interesting thing. There were many hotel teams, and I know in Kansas City, there was Jenkins Music Store, Bradbury Music Store. There were a lot of white businesses who sponsored African American teams to promote their business. And so there were a lot of hotels and things like that sponsored people. This particular hotel is still there. It's not a hotel anymore, but it's in Wichita, Kansas. And if you go to that hotel, there's a statue right in front. And there's a lady who went in there with a hatchet and busted up the board. And somebody knows about Carrie Nation?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they have a picture, they have a statue of Carrie Nation right in front of this building. But when I go there, I get a chance to talk about the baseball team. But you can go around there with baseball teams all over the country. And so you could sponsor a team, but you couldn't stay in that hotel. So this is just one example, and I could go on, in Florida, they played at the Royal Ponciano all the time. You couldn't stay at the Royal. You could work at the Royal Ponciano, but you couldn't stay there. And that's the story of things that went all over the country. But this is a story of a lot of hotels and businesses that sponsored African American teams. And then the other night I was speaking on Frank Whitworth. I have to tell you, how many people have ever heard of Frank Whitworth? Frank Whitworth. We have one person. It's going to be a new one for you, okay? First of all, he's born in Girard, Kansas. If you go online, a lot of things say Coffeyville, Kansas. That's incorrect. So I went to Girard, Kansas last Saturday and gave a presentation. And I said, guys, we set it all up. I said, when I come there, have the mayor get some soil from Girard, Kansas, because I'm going to the east. And he died in Schenectady. So I said, I'm going to Schenectady, and we're going to sprinkle that soil from Kansas over his grave. And that will get him exposed, because when you're talking about ball players that lived a long time ago, you have to be creative, or people just forget them. So you have to find creative ways to keep their names out front. And so I went there with my Kansas soil, sprinkled the dirt, sprinkled the soil. My wife told me, don't use dirt, use soil. You got to listen to your wife. So I sprinkled the soil, and when we finished, because he was a World War I veteran, I also played tennis. And so that was Frank Whitworth. And at the time, Frank Whitworth this is 1930. They considered him one of the 7 greatest pitchers. And when they make these lists here, these are not just African American players. These are who they thought were the best. And Walter Johnson said that he believed Frank Whitworth was the greatest pitcher ever. And he said, well, maybe I shouldn't say that because it might not be giving credit to people like Christy Mathewson. So why would Walter Johnson make a statement like that? And they were from the same hometown, Coffeyville. They lived in the same hometown. So that's Frank Whitworth. There's a few other ones on there. Number 1, number 2 are in the Hall of Fame. Number 3, he didn't get in last. Basketball, 3rd time he didn't get in. And, but you notice most of them have nicknames. I'm going back to Wilbur Butler Rogan in a minute. I've written an entire book on him. And Frank Whitworth's name was the Red Ant. And in African American culture, we have a nickname we call black people who are very fair skinned. We call them red. That's quite a common nickname. So that tells me something about him. Now I don't know where the ant part came from. I don't know. So anyway, that's Frank Whitworth, who played for Schenectady just right down the road. He's very good. That's interesting. I have to go back and do it, man. I don't know what happened. Try this. There we go. Okay. Then also, Frank Whitworth, the reason he came to the United States, excuse me, not the United States, the reason he came to the Negro National League, he came before there was a league. And it was this man, Ruth Foster. And how many people have heard of Ruth Foster? President, okay. Ruth Foster, there's a lot of things I can say about Ruth Foster. 1980, I went to Ruth Foster's house, and his actually sister was still living at that time. And so you got to go. Okay.
I think so.
And so that's Ruth Foster. But I was thinking about Ruth Foster. But Ruth Foster is another person. If you're following the Negro Leagues, he's somebody you want to know. So let me get this.
I'm the trainer.
Oh, there it is. There you go. Okay. And of course, this was his team. Some of these teams are outstanding. I wrote an entire book on this team as part of a series I wrote called the Chicago Cleveland Giants Great Teams. And in 1910, they won 126 games and lost 6 all summer long. It's an amazing story, but there were many great teams like that. But Ruth Foster. And how many people went out? Did anybody go out to Birmingham last year for the game?
No, the year before.
The year before, okay. Well, this picture here was taken down in Birmingham. I'm still wearing the same jersey. Maybe I should have changed jerseys.
No, you got pointed at the kid, and the holder's on the other side.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then also, how many people have heard of James Cooper Bell? How about that? Okay. Well, let me tell you this. When I was growing up, I heard Muhammad Ali. He was on TV, said, "I'm so fast I can turn the lights off and get in the bed before the room got dark." He stole that from Sacred Page, who said that about Cooper Bell. And so I started wondering, I said, it's kind of interesting. You got to be careful where you get your quotes from. Because that was something Sacred Page said about this man, who was one of the all-time great speakers in the Negro Leagues. So that's Cooper Bell. And he told me that in 1933, he said he stole 173 bases in a year. And he said he only got credit for 98 because he kept leaving the school. That was James Cooper Bell. So I was thinking about him. But you know, when I think about quotes, well, Sacred Page had a quote. And his quote was, "Age is mind over matter." He had many quotes, but one of them is, "Age is mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter." He stole that. That's Mark Twain. But a lot of people don't know that. So always, research your quotes a little bit more. And that's Cooper Bell. And you know what? Just honored to have a picture. And a lot of times, sometimes I'll post this picture somewhere. People say, "How old are you? You know Cooper Bell?" I guess they figured he lived a long time ago. Probably they played vintage baseball. That's what they think.
The holder's on the other side, Phil, so maybe pointing towards it, advance the slide.
Ah, there we go. And then with the new statistics that are out now. Now, when I was first starting to collect baseball cards, reading baseball memorabilia and the stories and everything, who was the person they said was the youngest person to ever play a game in the major leagues?
Joe Nuxall.
Joe Nuxall, that's right. We all learned that when you're reading baseball with Cincinnati. That's the way we learned it. But now that the statistics are merged, he's no longer the youngest. And I was going to share that with Leslie, because there's another one that snuck in there. Roy Campanella was playing with the Newark team. And so, actually, Roy Campanella is now the youngest. But also, I wanted to mention, because some of these guys, when they came through, the first guys through the door faced the most harsh treatment that you could get. So we know about Jackie Robinson's story, right? Most people know this. But they're going to give a celebration in Hagerstown this year, because Willie Mays played his first game there and got the worst treatment, and he vowed never to go back. And it took him years before he could go back. And so that's Willie Mays. And so in some of the stuff he wrote about what happened when he went there. And these are stories that slipped away. So when I first started following baseball, they only talked about Willie Mays from the point where he got to the New York Giants in the minor league. So now all the books go back even further and recognize the years in the Negro Leagues. That was unheard of going back 40 years. It just didn't happen. So Ernie Banks, they said he played for the Monarchs, and that's all you got. They said, and I don't even know if they even mentioned Willie. And they didn't mention Campbell. I didn't know any of this as a kid, but I wish I had. And you know, going back to Dick Allen was with the Phillies. And he was there with Ferguson Jenkins. Most people know Ferguson Jenkins from the Cubs. Well, he was with the Phillies at first. And so the Phillies moved their franchise, minor league franchise, to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1964. And they sent Dick Allen and Fergie Jenkins to Arkansas, Little Rock. Somebody knows the South was kind of tough back then. And so they're there. And one thing, when I talked to Dick Allen, one of the reasons why he was so bitter is because when he got down there, how he was treated. He just never really recovered from it. It was almost like a traumatic experience. And so when we think about some of the things that Dick Allen did, I would have never known that. I didn't have any traumatic experiences, but he did. And it came from going to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1964. And if you want to, there's some great quotes from Ferguson Jenkins online. And if you want to read some more on that, you can go to Dick Allen's book, Crash. And I don't know if you know this, Dick Allen was the first baseball player to play the infield and wear a helmet. And he was scared somebody was going to throw something at him, hit him in the head or something. So he took his helmet and he would play first base with a helmet. So a lot of things. But a lot of this came from these traumatic experiences that they had. I'm sorry.
This is my
I don't know where it is. Try it over here. Well, I think I'm gonna get some assistance from my wife. I'm gonna put this down.
I'll just
All
stand.
right.
I'll just stand.
Okay, and I'm sure you heard of Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson. There's a story of Josh Gibson. Years ago, I published a book called The Negro Baseball League's Photographic Pictures. And in there, a guy named Jesse Williams told me the story. He said Josh Gibson was playing against the Kansas City Monarchs, and he went over to the bat rack. And they had a bat there, it was all taped up and those kind of things. So he said, he asked Josh, he said, "Hey Josh, this must be your old broken bat." And Josh Gibson said, "I don't break bats, I wear the bat." And that was Josh Gibson, tremendous home run hitter. And so that story is kind of interesting because sometimes you don't always get credit for the story. And so I published that, and I gave Jesse Williams credit in my book, and then of course I published it in my book, and that's Josh Gibson. There you go. Thank you. I got down to Birmingham last year, and guess what I see? That great pool down in Birmingham. It's kind of like the Sacker Page where Muhammad Ali borrowed from the Sacker Page. And got down there, and guess what? They got it. I don't break bats, son, I wear them out. They forgot all about Jesse Williams and Phil Dixon. But the legacy goes on. So keep telling your stories. You never know where they're going to show up. Go to the next one. And here's an interesting story. In 1920, I want you to remember this. 1920, they organized the Negro National League. They had all black players and all black owners except for two men. And those two men were Tom Bayer and J.L. Wilkinson, co-owners of the Kansas City Monarchs. Have anybody heard of, J.L. Wilkinson? How about Tom Bayer? I'm going to tell you something about both of them. I'm going to put this down. I'm going to tell you something about both of them that you'll find interesting. J.L. Wilkinson, he was a believer in gender equality. He felt like women ought to be playing baseball right along with the men, not softball, baseball. So his first team he organized was the Bloomer Girls. And he had all-girls team, and he had three guys who dressed up like girls and did the pitching. I'm going to make a political statement, probably my only one of the night. Don't ask me where they went to use the restroom. No jail workers. Later on, he organized a team called the All Nations that had all nationalities in it. And so, how about this? He had Native Americans, he had black people, white people, he had an Italian guy playing with him, and the first ever Japanese professional baseball player played for the All Nation. It was such a radical idea they had to have their own Pullman car, and they couldn't travel with the rest of the people on the train. They had to have a special Pullman car so they could stay together. And that was J.L. Wilkinson. And also, in 1929, he took a group of the Kansas City Monarchs down to Lawrence, Kansas, and we're Haskell Indian College, and started playing night football. and he wanted to see if you could play baseball in the lights. And it worked. So they did everything you could do. And so the next year, he put four trucks together. They had a jackknife construction. He introduced night baseball all over America. The interesting thing was Van Johnson, president of the American League, said that night baseball would never last. It's just a passing fad. And J.L. Wilkinson said that lights would be the baseball, what talkies are the movies. And the movies had just started talking in 1927 with Al Joseph's The Jazz Singer. So who was right on that? J.L. Wilkinson, right? But we don't know him hardly, but he's in the Hall of Fame up the street. That's J.L. Wilkinson. Then, of course, there was Tom Baker. Tom Baker was the other co-owner. He always liked to go out by T.Y. Baker. And the reason why is because his middle name was a very familiar name in the Midwest, where they were booking the Monarchs, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri. And his name was Thomas Younger Baker. So when you put Younger with Kansas, Missouri, what do you get? You got some Westerns. Outlaws. He got the right word. Outlaws. So he didn't want people to know that he was Candace Cole Younger. So he always kept T.Y. Baker. And if you really want to get technical, I knew his daughter, and she told me a story. She said, we had some other cousins, and they tried to stage a daylight bank robbery in Coffeyville, Kansas. They called it the Dalton Gang. Those are also his cousins. But today we know him as T.Y. Baker. And then, of course, the guy in the middle, he was the road manager for the House of David, a guy named Ray L. Doe. He invented a little thing called donkey baseball. I don't know how much you know about donkey baseball. You go look that one up. There's lots of it. But that's your guy, Ray L. Doe. So we go to the next slide. And then also, this is the House of David. When I talk to young people, I have to let them know that this team here is not a bunch of hippies from the 1960s. This was a bona fide baseball team. They were part of a religious cult out of Benton Harbor, Michigan. And if you joined this cult, you were never supposed to die. And the leader was Benjamin Parnell. And of course, he died in 1927. And every time somebody died, they tweaked the rules just a little bit so they wouldn't lose people. And so that is the House of David. One thing about the House of David, there's a great documentary here, and it's called, well, this is the second one. The first one was called House of David, Life Everlasting. And if you ever get a chance to see that, there's one black guy there, you can't miss him, and it's me. And the only reason I'm in there because I met a black ball player who wanted to get in the House of David in the 1930s, but they didn't have any black people. So he tried to convince them he was part Choctaw Indian. That didn't work. How do you prove you're 2/3 Choctaw Indian in 1930? I don't know how, but he tried. So when I met him, his name was Maurice Doolittle Young, great nickname, Maurice Doolittle Young. He began to tell me about Benjamin Parnell, which I had never heard of, Father Divine. He knew about Haile Selassie. And he was a Catholic to boot. He knew about the Pope. And so that's how I learned a lot of these religious teachers. And so they got me interested. And so that's how I ended up 35 years later in the documentary, because I never put it down in the House of David. And they also invented a couple of things that you use. How many people have ever seen the automatic bowling stacker? Bowling pin, when you bowling and stacker? The House of David invented it. And they also invented a little thing, because they were pioneers in frozen foods. They were at the World's Fair in 1903, St. Louis, the waffle cone. So they pioneered. They were also vegetarians. Great history. Now in 1931, we can go to the next slide. 1931, well, actually this is the one I used the other day. And this is kind of to illustrate the point. I know a lot of African American baseball history, and these teams are traveling year after year after year. One of the things, it's very hard to know where they stay. But when I do work on the House of David, I can usually know where they stay. And recently came to Schenectady, I know right where they stay. And so I was able to show them in these postcards right where they stayed. And some of these hotels are still there. The hotel that Bud Fowler couldn't eat in the hotel is still there. Las Vegas, New Mexico. Not Nevada, New Mexico. All right, so we go to the next slide. Just want to show you that. But in 1931, the House of David decided they were going to do something different. So in 1930, the Kansas City Monarchs had the rights. So the next year, Tom Baird and J.L. Wilkinson leased the lights to the House of David. So now Ray Dome has the lights. But Ray Dome needed something else, so he got Grover Cleveland Alexander, who had just left the major leagues. Grover Cleveland's favorite line was, "I came into the league with nothing, and I'm leaving with nothing." And when he was put into the Hall of Fame, 1937-38, he said, "It's just your picture on the wall. You can't eat it." Well, I did get a chance to take a picture with that picture on the wall all these years later. But that was Grover Cleveland. Now, Grover Cleveland would come out and pitch 1 inning a night, and that would be it. Maybe 2 innings, because he had to pitch every night. Everybody wanted to see Grover Cleveland Alexander. But he would come out and pitch 1 inning a night. Now, some nights he couldn't get up to pitch that 1 inning. I'll tell you the reason why. He was known to take a nip. Somebody knows what that means? Known to take a nip? So that was Grover Cleveland Alexander. And once again, holds the National League record for career shutouts, 373 wins, but the way you saw him in the 1930s is with the House of David. And of course, he's a member of the Hall of Fame. I did have one other thing here. Grover Cleveland was supposed to pitch in the town, and he was going to pitch against this other major leaguer. Well, Grover Cleveland couldn't get up to pitch. So the major leaguer came and pitched the game for both teams, and he beat himself 2-1. And Grover Cleveland was one of those people, and there's a great movie about Grover Cleveland. And I don't know if has anybody seen the movie? It's called The Winning Team. Winning Team? And Grover Cleveland, he's named after what? President. And when they made this movie in the early 1950s, Ronald Reagan, our 40th president, played Grover Cleveland Alexander. That's the kind of stuff baseball people love. We love trivia. His wife was Doris Day, by the way. Anyway, also, when I was thinking about guys who were good when they were old, I was thinking about people like Satchel Paige. But there are also ball players who never lived to be old. So you can't forget about them. One I just spotlight 2 of them. Don Wilson, I don't know if you remember Don Wilson, pitched for the Astros, 6 years. That was a Chet Brewer ball player. He was with Chet Brewer also. And he died from carbon monoxide poisoning, him and his son, in the garage. And then also Pearl Webster. Pearl Webster died in World War I. So they were actually ball players. But this is kind of history we never got when I was studying as a kid growing up, and I didn't know about everything about baseball. Of course, that's a poetic saying on the back of Satchel Paige's monument. If you're in Kansas City, you can go and see that monument. An interesting thing about that monument, guess who wrote it? That's right, somebody knew it. I made one big mistake. I didn't put my name on it, so nobody knows that I did it. But it did connect me with an all-time great. And for a kid who started out collecting baseball cards, to be connected with someone like Satchel Paige and to write something on his monument is quite the thrill. And I consider that one of the greatest things that I've ever done. That's Satchel Paige. And lots of stories I can tell you about Satchel Paige. Well, one of I'll tell you this one. You've heard of Dixon and Daffy Dean? Yes. I have a book on Dizzy Dean over there. I will tell you this too. There's a lot of people who are not African American who write about the Negroes. Have you noticed that? Yeah. I guess there's only one African American who writes about old white guys in major leagues. You're looking at me. I love baseball. I will write about anybody who picks up a baseball. I don't care. But Dizzy Dean was fun to write about, right? So I have a book, 1934, after the World Series. Dizzy Dean and his brother won over 50 games. 2 brothers for the St. Louis Cardinals. They could have gone home after they beat the Detroit Tigers, but they decided to go on a barnstorming tour against the greatest African American teams they could face. And in the last 3 games of that series, they faced the Pittsburgh Cardinals. And then after the series was over, the whole barnstorming tour was over, a reporter came up to Dizzy Dean and he said, "Dizzy, who's the greatest pitcher you ever saw?" If you know anything about Dizzy, he did brag a little bit, but he always said it's not bragging if you could do it. In the 1930s, this guy could really do it, right? So they asked him, "Who's the greatest pitcher you ever saw?" He said, "The greatest pitcher I ever saw was a colored boy named Satchel Paige." He said, "If you can get him and me on the same team, we could win a pennant by the 4th of July and go fishing into the World Series." That was Dizzy Dean. Dizzy Dean's wife, her name's Patricia. He married a lady 10 years older. She used to tell a story. She said, I met Dizzy one night. She said, the next night we went on our first date. She said, the next night he asked me to marry her. And the next night we got married. She said, when I tell people that story, they think I'm Dizzy too. And of course, Satchel Paige, lots of stories I can tell you about Satchel Paige. I am on the Satchel Paige Foundation. And I get a chance to talk to his daughter and his grandkids and great-grandkids. He got great-grandkids. And so, story. One of my favorite Satchel Paige stories. Satchel Paige was such a celebrity that he did not have to ride on the bus with the rest of the team. He could drive his own car. He had 2 cars. He had a black Cadillac and a pink Cadillac. When I tell people about the pink Cadillac, sometimes they laugh. Because see, no guy wants a pink Cadillac now because that Mary Kay lady. He knows Mary Kay. I'm trying to get out of joke. But Satchel Paige had that. So the story goes, he was speeding through a small town. Let's make it Cooperstown. He was speeding through Cooperstown. And going a little bit too fast. And the local sheriff pulled him over and said, speeding through our community, you need to pay this ticket. So Satchel Paige said, let's go pay it. So they go down before the judge, it's the daytime, and the judge looks the case over and said, okay, speeding through our community, that's going to cost you $25. And so Satchel Paige said, Your Honor, I'm going to give you $50. And the judge said, what is this for? He said, I'll be back this evening. I'm coming right through there again. So that's Satchel Paige. A lot of great things, and you know Satchel Paige, of course, baseball's oldest rookie. Right? And how about this? He's the oldest man ever pitched in a major league game, 59 years old. He gave me some competition every year. 59 years old, pitched 3 innings, and he gave up a double to Corey Yastrzemski, and he struck out 1 batter, Billy Momo. And you know these names when you collect baseball cards. I'm telling you, you know these names, right? So that was Satchel Paige. We almost finished here. And of course, I come across a lot of these stories. This guy, he played for the Monarchs. He was a great running back. A lot of these guys played more than one sport. They could have been boxers, they could have been football players. But he played for the Teachers College here in Emporia, Kansas. But Kansas had different rules than Missouri. So whenever he crossed in Missouri, he couldn't play. And of course, they didn't want him to play because he's the best player on the team. So that George split. Of course, Wilbur Bullet Rogan, a guy I happen to think is the greatest all-around player who ever lived. And I've spent time writing an entire book on Wilbur Bullet Rogan. And I'll tell you what, the reason I think he's the greatest of all time that ever lived, because when I say all-time greatest, that's someone who can pitch and hit, greatest all-around player. And so that's the reason why I had Wilbur Bullet Rogan. So, you know, remember, I'm just a kid from Kansas collecting baseball cards. So who the rest of America said was the greatest all-around baseball player? Who they say it is? Babe Ruth, right? So how do they compare with Babe Ruth? We'll give you just quick numbers and then we'll be on the side of here. As a starting pitcher, Babe Ruth never won over 400 games. Bullet Rogan did. Also, Bullet Rogan hit over 400 home runs. I've been able to document it. Of course, Babe Ruth hit 714 in the regular season in Major League, right? Babe Ruth was 6'2". This guy was 5'7.5" with skinny legs. He was also a fast runner. He could run a 100-yard dash in less than 10 seconds. Now, somebody knows Babe Ruth couldn't do that. And if that's not enough for you, he also drove the bus. And that was Wilbur Bullet Rogan. I've written some great things about him. Of course, we all know about John Buck O'Neill. And I have a book. I didn't bring it with me. You can order it online. And you might consider this. The book I wrote on John Buck O'Neill was the first ever baseball book with QR codes. So if you scan the QR codes, you can hear the earliest interview you've ever heard from Buck O'Neill is from like 1986. And there's no interview that predates the one that's in my book. And so that's John Buck O'Neill. And of course, that's my wife there, John, and that's my son there. And Buck O'Neill is 6'2", and my son is 6'4". So it's got 11 QR codes in the book if you ever want to see something interesting. And I got that from people who did genealogy. So I said, if they can do it, I can do it too. I have all these old cassette tapes. I even recorded one guy on 8-track tape. How about that? Somebody said, what is that? He probably never heard of that. Okay, we go to the next slide. We're on the genealogy. So guys, you've been really good for So if you want to follow me any kind of way, you can just take a shot of that. It has all the ways you contact me. I want to end with one, and I just want to thank you. Now I'm going to move out the way so they can get dinner served, and I can't wait to hear Bill Lee. And I did bring the card here, Bill. Keep Bill busy here with this card. So here we go. And I'm going to use some of the names I used in the program tonight. So my name is Bud Fowler. My name is Chad Brewer, but my age is way beyond. I spent my prime in baseball shoes, but my sporting days are gone. Now I'm just one more forgotten face among the black-faced teams, an old dark horse that came the course they call the Negro Leagues. And I worked the fields in Tennessee, but I dreamed of better days, so I left the plow and the picking bag to join the Homestead Grays. And all summer long we played the states that headed south for fall. We rain and dust, we rode the bus so we could play baseball. Now we played for love, and we played for pride, and we seldom made much more. We bred the beans to hold their folks, the roads were crowds no more. The all-night rides to Seaside came with the life I chose, but we made do, and we came through, because damn, we were pros. And we played the shadow of the big Luke, Eric, and the rest, then stayed outside that big blue fence while they were called the best. And we played them well, and we gave them hell with every hidden pitch, then stayed behind that color line and watched those boys get rich. But did they see Josh Gibson swing or Sackler throw a stuff? Or can you imagine how bad it feels when your best is not good enough? When clouds roll in across the sky to hide the brightest moon, it's then you'll find some stars don't shine. Some folks were born too soon. So God bless you, Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, and all. You wore our numbers on your back when you played big league ball. And every time you hit one out, sleeve and laid one down, you carried us from that old bus to the halls of Cooperstown. Now my name is John Buck O'Neill. You might not remember that, but I'm just one more along the score who played with ball and bat. But everyone, when you seek out heroes and you praise this great pastime, remember a few of those old brown-faced pros, the stars that did not shine. Thank you very much.
Second hand of applause, please, for Phil. And let me guess, he played his trumpet when I was off to use the washroom. Is that what happened, Phil? Yeah. Son of a gun. We did record it, so I can't see it. Anyway, if you haven't had a chance to buy any of his books, please take some time. His wife set up a table as you're getting your food or about to get your food. Phil's on a mission, in case you haven't figured that out about him. This is not a guy that's out there to get rich. He's got a story he needs to tell, and you're fortunate enough you got to hear Phil's presentation tonight. So thank you, Phil. So we're close. We're supposed to start at 7:30. Is that what I counted? You remember the ship's time thing? Yeah, okay. The food's all ready. They've got stuff set up. I don't know. Are we ready? They can start. All right. This may be where I ask you to get in line one table at a time. Is that a smart idea? So the food's been sitting there while you've been listening to Phil. So why don't we do this? We're going to start at the back of the room, because I'm that guy that always sits in the back. And I'll just go table to table. So this table right here, go ahead and get started. And this table also, please, go ahead and get started. Over there.